The blood on her dress had long since washed away, but the stain on her reputation in White River, Arizona, would never fade, or so the townspeople seemed determined to prove. Zara Wright stood outside the general store in the scorching afternoon heat of July 1878, her basket clutched tightly in both hands as Mrs. Henderson deliberately turned her back and walked away without a word. It was the third time that week someone had refused to acknowledge her existence, and it was only Wednesday. She had arrived in White River 6 months ago, fleeing a past that had nearly destroyed her, hoping to find peace in this small town nestled along the Salt River. Instead, she had found judgment colder than any winter wind. She had been 19 when it happened back in Santa Fe. Marcus Dalton, a wealthy rancher's son, had courted her with pretty words and prettier promises. She had believed every lie that dripped from his lips like honey. When she discovered she was carrying his child, he had disappeared faster than rain in the desert, leaving her to face the consequences alone. The baby, a tiny girl she had named Sarah, lived only 3 days before fever took her away. The loss had shattered something fundamental inside Zara, but she had survived. She always survived. White River was supposed to be different. She had changed her name from Dalton back to Wright, her maiden name, and told no one about Santa Fe or Marcus or the tiny grave she had left behind. But somehow, as secrets always do in small towns, the truth had found its way into the light. A traveling merchant who had known Marcus's family recognized her at the post office 2 months ago. Within a week, every person in White River knew that Zara Wright was a fallen woman, unmarried and with a dead bastard child in her past. The whispers followed her everywhere now. Women pulled their skirts aside when she passed. Men looked at her with either contempt or the kind of hunger that made her skin crawl. The boarding house owner, Mrs. Patterson, had raised her rent twice, clearly hoping Zara would leave town entirely. But Zara had nowhere else to go, and more importantly, she refused to run again. She had done nothing wrong except trust the wrong man and love too deeply. She finally entered the general store, keeping her eyes down as she walked to the counter. Mr. Phillips, the owner, barely looked at her as he tallied her purchases with obvious reluctance. She needed flour, sugar, coffee, and thread for the sewing work she took in to make ends meet. It was barely enough to survive on, but the women of White River would only hire her for mending work because she charged half what the proper seamstress did. Even then, they left their items on her doorstep rather than speak to her directly. "That will be $2.40, Mr. Phillips said flatly. Zara counted out the coins carefully, aware that her funds were dwindling dangerously low. She would need to find more work soon, or she would be facing genuine hunger. She had already skipped meals 3 times this week to make her supplies stretch further. As she gathered her packages, the door opened behind her with a jangle of bells. She did not turn around immediately, but she heard the shift in Mr. Phillips's demeanor instantly. His voice went from cold to warm in a heartbeat. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ross. What can I do for you today?" "Afternoon, George. I need supplies for the ranch. Got a list here." The voice was deep and measured, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. Zara risked a glance over her shoulder and saw a tall man in dusty ranch clothes standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands. He had dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water after rain, somewhere between blue and gray. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. He looked to be in his mid-20s, perhaps 26 or 27. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Zara quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing. She hurried toward the door, trying to slip past him without incident. "Excuse me, miss," he said, stepping aside politely. His voice held none of the contempt she had grown accustomed to hearing. It was simply courteous, the way one person spoke to another. "Thank you," she whispered, and fled into the bright sunlight. She did not see the way his eyes followed her, thoughtful and curious. She did not see the way Mr. Phillips leaned across the counter and said in a low voice, "That is Zara Wright. You would do well to keep your distance, Mr. Ross. She is not the sort of woman a decent man associates with." What she also did not see was the way the cowboy's expression hardened, or the cool tone that entered his voice when he replied, "I will decide for myself what sort of woman she is, George. Now, about those supplies." Wade Ross had been working at the Diamond Creek Ranch for 8 months now, ever since he had drifted into White River looking for honest work. The ranch owner, an aging man named Thomas Garrett, had hired him on the spot after watching him handle a spooked horse with patience and skill. Wade had been the ranch foreman for 3 months now, overseeing 20 hands and managing the day-to-day operations, while Mr. Garrett's health slowly failed. He was 26 years old and had been on his own since he was 16, when his parents died of cholera during the epidemic that swept through San Antonio. He had learned early that life was hard and often unfair, but he had also learned that a person's worth was not determined by their circumstances, but by their character. The rushed judgments and cruel gossip of small towns had never sat well with him. That evening, as he sat on the porch of the ranch house going over the books, he found his thoughts returning to the young woman in the general store. She had looked so alone, so weary, like someone carrying a weight far too heavy for her slim shoulders. Her eyes, when they had briefly met his, had been a striking shade of green, like new leaves in spring, but filled with a wariness that spoke of too much pain. "You are thinking mighty hard about something," came a voice from the doorway. Thomas Garrett shuffled out onto the porch, moving slowly with the aid of his cane. At 72, he was still sharp-minded despite his failing body. "Just puzzling something out," Wade replied, setting down his pencil. "Tell me about Zara Wright." Thomas settled himself into his rocking chair with a sigh. "Figured you might have heard the talk. That girl has had a rough time of it. George Phillips seemed to think I should avoid her, called her not decent." Thomas snorted. "George Phillips is a pompous fool who has never made a mistake in his life because he has never taken a risk or felt a genuine emotion. That girl came here looking for a fresh start, and this town has done everything possible to deny her that. So the stories are true, about her past." "True enough, I suppose. She got herself involved with a man who made promises he had no intention of keeping. She paid the price, and he walked away clean. Lost her baby, too, from what I hear. Not that anyone in this town seems to care about that part. They just see a woman who fell from grace and think that gives them the right to treat her like dirt beneath their boots." Wade was silent for a moment, digesting this. "Does not seem right, the way they are treating her. It is not right, but when has that ever stopped people from doing it?" Thomas rocked slowly, the chair creaking. "Her mama was from around these parts originally. That is why she came here, I think, hoping family connections might help. But her mama ran off when she was young, caused quite the scandal herself. Folks have long memories for that sort of thing. They see the mother's sins in the daughter, even though the girl never did anything to them. Someone should stand up for her." Thomas gave him a long look, his old eyes shrewd. "Careful, son. You take her side and this town will turn on you too. You have built a good reputation here. People respect you. You throw that away defending a fallen woman, and you might find yourself looking for work elsewhere." Wade met his gaze steadily. "My reputation is not worth much if I have to ignore injustice to keep it. A slow smile spread across Thomas's weathered face. "That is what I was hoping you would say. Your mama raised you right, Wade Ross." Over the next few days, Wade found himself watching for Zara Wright whenever he came into town for supplies or business. He saw the way people treated her, the turned backs and harsh whispers, the deliberate snubs and cruel glances. It made his blood boil, but he forced himself to be patient. Charging in like a bull would only make things worse for both of them. His opportunity came on Saturday morning. He had come into town to pick up a part for the plow and found a small crowd gathered outside the church. Raised voices drew him closer, and he arrived just in time to see Reverend Mitchell standing on the church steps, blocking Zara Wright from entering. "I have made myself clear, Miss Wright," the Reverend was saying, his voice carrying across the street. "Your presence in our congregation is disruptive. The ladies have expressed their discomfort, and I must prioritize the spiritual well-being of my established flock." Zara stood before him, her face pale but her spine straight. She wore her only good dress, a simple gray cotton that had been carefully mended in several places. Her dark hair was pinned up neatly under a modest bonnet. She looked like she was about to shatter, but she kept her voice steady. "I only want to worship, Reverend. I need the Lord's guidance as much as anyone. Then perhaps you should seek it in private prayer until such time as you have demonstrated true repentance and reform." "Repentance for what?" Wade heard himself say, pushing through the small crowd. "For being lied to, for trusting someone who did not deserve it." The crowd fell silent. Reverend Mitchell's face flushed red. "Mr. Ross, this is a church matter. This is a matter of basic Christian charity, Reverend, and from where I am standing, I am not seeing much of that." Wade moved to stand beside Zara, not quite touching but close enough that his intention was clear. "Seems to me the Lord spent a lot of time with people the righteous folks of his day looked down on. Seems to me he had some pretty harsh words for those who cast stones." "How dare you presume to lecture me on Scripture?" the Reverend sputtered. "Not lecturing, just remembering what I learned in Sunday school, about mercy and forgiveness and judging not lest ye be judged." Wade kept his voice level but firm. "Miss Wright wants to attend services. I cannot see any good reason to bar her door." Mrs. Henderson pushed forward from the crowd. "The reason is that she is a woman of loose morals who will corrupt our daughters with her example." Wade turned to face her. "Is that so? And what exactly has she done since arriving in White River? Has she caused trouble, stolen anything, led anyone astray? Or has she simply worked hard, kept to herself, and tried to live a quiet life?" "Her past speaks for itself," Mr. Phillips added from the edge of the crowd. "Her past is that she was wronged by a man who faced no consequences while she lost everything. If we are going to judge her for that, then we better start judging all the men in this town who have ever lied to a woman or broken a promise. I reckon the church would be pretty empty then." Several of the women in the crowd looked uncomfortable at that. Wade saw more than one husband suddenly find the ground very interesting. Reverend Mitchell drew himself up to his full height, which still left him several inches shorter than Wade. "Mr. Ross, if you continue to defend this woman, you will find yourself unwelcome in this church as well. Then, I reckon Miss Wright and I will pray under God's sky instead, which is a finer cathedral than any building man could construct." Wade looked at Zara for the first time since he had started speaking. Her green eyes were wide with shock and bright with unshed tears. "If that is all right with you, miss." She opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. "I do not want you to sacrifice your place here for me. No sacrifice. Just making a choice about what kind of man I want to be." He offered her his arm. "Shall we?" For a long moment, she just stared at his extended arm like it was a snake that might bite. Then, with a deep breath that seemed to come from the bottom of her soul, she placed her hand lightly on his sleeve. He could feel her trembling. They walked away from the church together, leaving a shocked and muttering crowd behind them. Wade led her down Main Street and out toward the edge of town, where a small grove of cottonwood trees grew beside the river. The morning sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground with light and shadow. Birds sang in the branches, and the water burbled over smooth stones. "This seems like a pretty good spot for worship," Wade said, removing his hat. "No reverend required." Zara stood beside him, her hand still resting on his arm, and suddenly the tears she had been holding back spilled over. She covered her face with her free hand, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Wade felt helpless in the face of her pain, but he did not walk away. He simply stood there, steady and solid, letting her lean on him until the storm passed. When she finally looked up, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but there was something different in her expression, something like hope. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "You do not even know me." "Do not need to know your whole story to know you deserve better than how this town treats you." He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "And I reckon I wanted to know you if you are willing." She took the handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes. "You will become an outcast like me. Everything you have built here, your reputation, your standing in the community, it will all be gone. Then it was not worth having in the first place." He sat down on a fallen log and gestured for her to join him. After a moment's hesitation, she did. "My name is Wade Ross. I am foreman at Diamond Creek Ranch. I am 26 years old, originally from San Antonio. I like honest work, good horses, and people who say what they mean. I do not like bullies, liars, or folks who think they are better than others just because they have had better luck." Despite everything, a small smile tugged at her lips. "I am Zara Wright. I am 20 years old. I take in sewing and mending work. I am from Santa Fe originally, though my mother was born near here. I like morning sunrises, strong coffee, and finishing a difficult piece of embroidery perfectly. I do not like crowds, gossip, or men who make promises they do not intend to keep." "Fair enough." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the river and the birds. "You do not have to tell me about your past if you do not want to. I figure that is your business. You will hear the stories eventually. Everyone else seems eager enough to share them." She twisted the handkerchief in her hands. "I was young and stupid. I believed a man when he said he loved me. When I became pregnant, he disappeared. My baby girl was born too early and lived only 3 days. My family disowned me. I came here hoping for a fresh start, but the past followed me." "I am sorry," Wade said simply. "Sorry about your baby. Sorry about the way people have treated you. Sorry that one man's cruelty has cost you so much." She looked at him with those startling green eyes. "You really mean that?" "I do." "I do not understand you, Wade Ross. What do you get out of defending me? People will assume we are having an affair. Your reputation will be destroyed. Maybe I am tired of watching good people suffer while bad people face no consequences. Maybe I think someone needs to stand up and say that this is wrong. Maybe I just think you deserve a friend." He stood and offered her his hand. "What do you say, Zara Wright? Can we be friends?" She looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, and he could see the fear and hope warring in her expression. Trust did not come easily to someone who had been betrayed so deeply. But finally, slowly, she placed her hand in his and let him help her to her feet. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." They stood there in the dappled sunlight, hands clasped, and Wade felt something shift in his chest. He had expected to feel good about helping someone in need. He had not expected to feel this pull toward her, this sense that something important had just begun. True to Wade's prediction, The town's reaction was swift and harsh. By Monday morning, everyone in White River had heard about the incident at the church. The story had grown in the telling, of course. Some versions had Wade and Zara embracing scandalously. Others claimed he had threatened the reverend with violence. The most elaborate tale involved them running off together into the wilderness for improper purposes. Wade arrived at the general store to find Mr. Phillips tight-lipped and cold. "I will serve you this once, Mr. Ross, but I want you to know that your behavior on Saturday was disgraceful. That woman has bewitched you somehow. That woman has a name, and the only disgraceful behavior I saw was a whole church full of people turning their backs on someone in need." Wade set his list on the counter. "Now, are you going to fill this order, or do I need to ride to the next town for supplies?" Mr. Phillips snatched the list and began gathering items with stiff, angry movements. Wade paid without another word and left. At the ranch, the hands were divided. Some of the cowboys looked at Wade with new respect. Others kept their distance, unwilling to associate with someone who had sided with a fallen woman. Thomas Garrett just smiled knowingly and said nothing. Wade rode into town every few days after that, always making a point to greet Zara when he saw her. At first, she seemed nervous about being seen with him, but gradually she began to relax. They fell into a pattern of meeting by the river on Sunday mornings for what Wade jokingly called their private church services. They would sit by the water and talk for hours, sharing stories about their lives and dreams. He learned that she had always wanted to open her own dress shop, that she had a gift for design and could create beautiful garments from the simplest materials. She learned that he wanted to own his own ranch someday, a small spread where he could raise good horses and cattle without answering to anyone but himself. "Why horses?" she asked one Sunday, watching the way the sun turned his hair to dark amber. "They are honest," he said simply. "A horse does not lie or pretend. If he likes you, he shows it. If he does not trust you, you have to earn it through patience and consistency. I appreciate that kind of straightforward relationship." She smiled. "I think I understand that. Fabric is honest too in its way. It shows every flaw, every mistake. You cannot fool fabric. You have to work with it as it is, not as you wish it to be." "Kind of like people when you think about it," Wade said. "We are all flawed. The question is whether we are trying to hide our mistakes or learn from them." These conversations, rambling and easy, became the brightest part of both their weeks. Wade found himself thinking about Zara during long days of ranch work, remembering something funny she had said or the way her whole face lit up when she smiled. It was a rare smile, hard one, but worth every effort it took to coax it out. For Zara, Wade's friendship was a lifeline. She had been so alone for so long, carrying her grief and shame in isolation. Having someone who saw her as a person rather than a scandal, who listened to her thoughts and valued her opinions, was like water in the desert. She began to feel human again, worth something beyond the sum of her mistakes. But the town's hostility did not abate. If anything, it intensified as the weeks passed, and it became clear that Wade had no intention of distancing himself from Zara. Mrs. Patterson finally made good on her implied threats and told Zara she would have to find new lodging by the end of the month. "I have received complaints from other boarders," she said with obviously false regret. "I cannot afford to lose their business for one tenant, even if I am sympathetic to your situation." Zara did not believe the sympathy for a moment, but she nodded and began looking for alternative arrangements. There were none to be found. No one in White River would rent to her. She tried every boarding house, every room for let, and was turned away from each one. With her funds dangerously low and August heat beating down mercilessly, She faced the real possibility of being homeless. She tried not to let Wade see how desperate she was becoming. Their friendship had become too precious to risk by burdening him with her problems. He had already sacrificed so much of his standing in the community for her sake. She could not ask for more, but Wade noticed anyway. He noticed the shadows under her eyes, the way she had grown even thinner, the worry lines creasing her forehead. Finally, one Sunday in mid-August, he confronted her about it. "What is wrong? And do not tell me nothing, because I can see that something is eating at you." She tried to deflect, but he was persistent, and eventually the whole story came spilling out. The eviction, the failed search for housing, her dwindling money, the very real fear that she would end up sleeping rough with no protection and no prospects. Wade listened in silence, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. When she finished, he stood abruptly and paced to the river's edge, his hands clenched into fists. "This has gone far enough. This town has no right to treat you this way." "They have every right," she said wearily. "It is their town. I am just an unwanted outsider with a shameful past." "No." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "You are a human being who deserves dignity and respect. You are a skilled seamstress, a thoughtful person, a woman who has survived more than most of these comfortable hypocrites will ever face. Your past does not define you. Their judgment does not define you." Tears sprang to her eyes at his words. No one had ever defended her so fiercely, believed in her so completely. "I do not know what to do," she whispered. "I have nowhere to go." Wade was silent for a long moment, clearly thinking hard. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Marry me." Zara stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What, marry me? I know it is sudden, and I know we have only known each other a few months, but hear me out." He came and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "You need a home and protection. I can provide both. As my wife, you would have a place at the ranch, and no one could evict you or refuse you service. You would be Mrs. Wade Ross, foreman's wife, and that carries weight even in this narrow-minded town. Wade, I cannot let you do that. Marriage is permanent. You would be tying yourself to me and my reputation forever. I know that." His gray-blue eyes were steady and serious. "And I am not proposing just out of charity, Zara. These past months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has been the best part of my life. I look forward to Sundays all week. I find myself riding into town on the flimsiest excuses, just hoping I might catch a glimpse of you. I think about you constantly. I respect you, I admire you, and I am already halfway in love with you." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "You cannot be. You do not really know me. I know you better than I have ever known anyone. I know you are brave and resilient. I know you are kind even when the world has been cruel to you. I know you work harder than anyone I have met. I know your smile is worth any price." He squeezed her hands gently. "I am not saying you have to love me back, not yet, but I think we could be happy together. I think we could build something good, and I know for certain that I want to protect you and stand beside you for whatever comes." Zara felt like she could not breathe. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grab onto this lifeline with both hands, but the other part, the part that had been hurt so deeply before, was terrified. "I was in love once before. It destroyed me. I do not know if I can risk that again. I am not Marcus Dalton. I will never lie to you or abandon you. When I make a promise, I keep it. Always." He brought her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I know you are scared, but I am scared too. I am scared of watching you suffer when I could prevent it. I am scared of letting you slip away because I was too cowardly to be honest about my feelings. Take a chance on me, Zara. Let me prove that not all men are like the one who hurt you." She looked into his face, this good man who had asked for nothing but her company, who had defended her when no one else would, who was offering her not just shelter but partnership and genuine affection. She thought about the alternative, sleeping in an alley, hungry and vulnerable, with no future and no hope. But more than that, she thought about Sunday mornings by the river, about conversations that made her laugh, about the way her heart lifted every time she saw him riding down Main Street. "I do not love you yet," she said honestly, "but I think I could. I think maybe I am already starting to." Hope blazed across his face. "Is that a yes?" "It is terrifying and probably foolish, but yes. Yes, I will marry you." He surged to his feet and pulled her up with him, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. But instead he just held her close, his arms strong and warm around her, his heart beating rapidly beneath her ear. "Thank you. I swear you will not regret this. I will spend every day trying to make you happy. Just being treated with kindness will make me happy," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "You have already given me more than I thought I would ever have again." They were married 3 days later by the Justice of the Peace, since Reverend Mitchell refused to perform the ceremony. Thomas Garrett stood as witness, along with his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had faced her own share of prejudice in White River and had a soft spot for underdogs. It was not the wedding either of them had imagined as children, no church full of loved ones or elaborate celebration. But as Zara stood beside Wade and repeated her vows, she felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was a new beginning. Wade had prepared a small cabin on the ranch property for them, one of the line shacks that had been recently repaired. It was just 2 rooms, but it was clean and sturdy, with a real stove and a comfortable bed and windows that let in the morning sun. To Zara, who had been facing homelessness just days before, it looked like a palace. "I know it is not much," Wade said, carrying her single trunk of belongings over the threshold, "but it is ours, and no one can take it from us." "It is perfect," she said honestly, running her hand over the smooth wood table. "It is more than I ever hoped to have." That first night, Wade was scrupulously respectful, offering to sleep on the floor if she would prefer. But Zara, tired of being alone, tired of being afraid, asked him to stay beside her. They lay in the darkness, not touching, just existing in the same space, and it felt like the safest she had been in years. "Wade," she whispered. "Yes, thank you for everything." She felt him turn toward her. "You do not have to thank me for treating you the way you deserve to be treated. Most people would disagree with you about what I deserve. Then most people are wrong." He reached out carefully in the darkness, and she met him halfway, their hands finding each other and intertwining. "Get some rest, Zara. Tomorrow we start building our life together." She squeezed his hand and closed her eyes, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept without nightmares. The town's reaction to their marriage was predictable. Shock, outrage, and a fair amount of malicious gossip about what Wade could possibly see in such a woman. Several of the ranchers who did business with Diamond Creek made noises about taking their trade elsewhere. A few of the ranch hands quit, unwilling to work under a foreman who had married a fallen woman. Thomas Garrett stood firm. "Anyone who has a problem with Wade's choice in wife can take their business elsewhere, and good riddance. I will not tolerate that kind of narrow-minded bigotry on my ranch." Still, it was hard. Zara felt the weight of every stare, every whisper, every turned back when they came into town together. She saw what her presence was costing Wade and felt sick with guilt. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said one evening, watching him review the ranch accounts with a furrowed brow. "Maybe I should leave, go somewhere else, let you rebuild your life without me dragging you down." Wade set down his pencil and looked at her seriously. "Do you want to leave?" "No. But I do not want to ruin your life either." "You are not ruining anything. You are my wife. You belong here with me." He held out his hand, and she came to sit beside him. "I will not lie and say this is easy, but nothing worth having ever is. We will weather this storm together, and we will come out stronger on the other side." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know us. I know what we are made of." He tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender and intimate. "You survived losing your child and your family and your reputation. I survived losing my parents and making my own way in the world. We are both fighters, Zara. This town does not stand a chance against us if we stand together." She wanted to believe him. Some days she did believe him. Other days, the weight of the town's disapproval felt crushing. But slowly, gradually, things began to shift. It started with Mrs. Chen, who invited Zara to tea one afternoon and treated her with friendly warmth. "I know what it is like to be judged for things outside your control," she said, pouring jasmine tea into delicate cups. "When I first came to America, people treated me like I was less than human. Your husband, he saw past that. He saw me, not my race. That is a rare quality." "He is a good man," Zara agreed. "He is. And he chose you. That speaks well of you, I think." Mrs. Chen smiled. "I would be honored to call you my friend if you would like." It was the first time since arriving in White River that another woman had offered Zara genuine friendship. She accepted gratefully, and found in Mrs. Chen a thoughtful, intelligent companion who had her own fascinating stories to share about immigrating from China and building a life in a foreign land. Through Mrs. Chen, Zara met a few other women who existed on the fringes of White River society. There was Maria Gonzalez, a Mexican woman married to one of the ranch hands who faced discrimination for her heritage. There was Ruth Thompson, a widow who ran a small farm on her own and was considered too independent and outspoken for proper society. These women, themselves outsiders, welcomed Zara into their small circle. For the first time since her world fell apart in Santa Fe, Zara had friends. Real friends who knew her story and accepted her anyway. It made an enormous difference. Meanwhile, Wade's steady competence and integrity began to win back some of the ground he had lost. When a neighboring ranch was hit by rustlers, Wade organized a response that recovered most of the stolen cattle. When a flash flood threatened the town, he led the effort to reinforce the riverbanks and evacuate people from low-lying areas. He did not preach or make speeches about tolerance. He simply did his job well and treated everyone with respect, and gradually people began to remember why they had valued him in the first place. It helped that Zara proved herself useful as well. When Mrs. Henderson's daughter was thrown from a horse and tore her riding habit beyond repair 2 days before an important social event, Mrs. Henderson swallowed her pride and brought the garment to Zara in desperation. No one else in town could have fixed it on such short notice. Zara worked through the night, taking apart the damaged sections and reconstructing them with such skill that the repair was invisible. When Mrs. Henderson came to collect it, she found the riding habit not only fixed but improved, with subtle embroidery around the collar that made it more elegant than the original. "How much do I owe you?" Mrs. Henderson asked stiffly. $2, Zara said, naming a fair price but not an inflated one. Mrs. Henderson paid and took the garment. At the door she paused. "You do excellent work." It was not an apology or an acceptance, but it was something, a tiny crack in the wall of hostility. Other women noticed. When you needed something done well and done quickly, Zara Ross was the person to see. Her prices were fair, her work was impeccable, and she never gossiped about her clients, which was more than could be said for the official town seamstress. Gradually, grudgingly, more work began to come her way. By October, Zara and Wade had settled into a comfortable rhythm. He rose before dawn to oversee the ranch work, and she spent her days sewing and mending, bringing in a modest but steady income. In the evenings, they would cook dinner together in their small cabin, talking about their days and making plans for the future. Somewhere along the way, without either of them quite noticing when it happened, the careful friendship between them had deepened into something more. Zara found herself watching for Wade to come home each evening, her heart lifting at the sound of his footsteps. Wade found excuses to touch her in passing, his hand at the small of her back, his fingers brushing hers as he handed her a cup of coffee. One evening in late October, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Wade said quietly, "I am in love with you, completely, absolutely in love with you. I thought you should know." Zara turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "When did you know?" "I think I knew that first day, when I saw you outside the general store. But I was certain the day you took my hand by the river and agreed to be my friend. I saw your courage then, your willingness to trust despite everything you had been through, and I thought, that is the bravest person I have ever met. I want to be brave like that." He reached out and cupped her face gently. "I am not asking you to say it back. I just wanted you to know. I love you, Zara. Every day I love you more." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I am so afraid of being hurt again. I know, I will wait as long as you need." But suddenly, she realized she was done waiting, done being afraid. This man had proven himself 1,000 times over. He had stood beside her when everyone else turned away. He had defended her, protected her, cherished her. He had made her laugh again, made her hope again, made her feel like a person worth loving. "I love you too," she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "I think I have loved you for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it." The smile that spread across Wade's face was worth everything she had endured to reach this moment. He pulled her close and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was her first kiss since Marcus Dalton had destroyed her life, and it felt like reclaiming something precious that had been stolen from her. This kiss was honest and true, untainted by lies or manipulation. This kiss was a beginning. They made love that night for the first time, slow and tender, learning each other with patience and care. Afterward, lying tangled together in their bed, Zara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" Wade asked, immediately concerned. "No, the opposite. I am just happy." "I did not think I could ever be this happy again." She kissed his shoulder. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for seeing something worth loving when everyone else only saw my shame." "I see you," he said simply. "I have always seen you, and what I see is beautiful." As autumn turned to winter, their love continued to deepen and grow. The cabin was cold in the mornings, but they kept each other warm. Money was sometimes tight, but they always had enough. The town was still not fully accepting, but the open hostility had faded to a grudging tolerance, and that was progress. In December, Thomas Garrett called Wade into his office for a serious conversation. "My health is failing faster than I would like to admit. The doctor says I might have another year, maybe 2 if I am lucky. I need to start thinking about what happens to Diamond Creek when I am gone." Wade nodded, his throat tight. He had grown genuinely fond of the old man. "I have no children, as you know. No family to speak of. This ranch has been my life's work, and I want it to go to someone who will care for it properly, who will treat the hands fairly and manage the land responsibly." Thomas looked at him seriously. "I want you to have it, Wade. I am having my lawyer draw up papers to transfer ownership to you upon my death, with the provision that Mrs. Chen receives a lifetime home here and a pension." Wade was stunned. "Sir, I do not know what to say. That is too generous. It is practical. You have been running this place for months now. You know every acre, every cow, every problem and possibility. You are honest and hardworking and fair-minded. I could not ask for a better successor." Thomas smiled. "Besides, I like your wife. She has spine. That girl has been through hell and came out the other side with her integrity intact. That is worth more than all the pedigree and respectability in the world. The two of you will do right by this place." Wade left the office in a daze and rode straight home to tell Zara. She was sitting by the stove, mending one of his shirts, and looked up with a smile when he entered. "You will not believe what just happened," he said, and told her everything. Zara set down her sewing carefully. "He is giving you the ranch, just like that, just like that." "Zara, do you understand what this means? We will have our own place, our own land. Everything we have talked about wanting, it is all coming true." She stood and went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "It is what you deserve. You have worked so hard. We will have our own home. A real home, not just a cabin. We can raise a family here, build something lasting." He pulled back to look at her. "I know you lost a child before. I know that must have been devastating. But someday, if you wanted to try again, if you wanted to have children with me, I would love that." Zara had not let herself think about children since Sarah died. The grief had been too overwhelming, the fear of loving and losing again too intense. But now, standing in Wade's arms, feeling safe and loved, she allowed herself to imagine it. A baby with Wade's eyes. A little girl who would grow up knowing she was wanted and cherished. A son who would learn honor and kindness from his father. "I think I would like that," she said softly. "Not right away, but someday, when I am ready." "Whenever you are ready," he agreed. "We have all the time in the world." Christmas came, and for the first time in years, Zara felt genuine joy during the holiday season. Wade cut down a small pine tree, and they decorated it with strings of popcorn and dried berries. Mrs. Chen and Maria and Ruth came for Christmas dinner, along with some of the ranch hands who had nowhere else to go. The cabin was crowded and noisy and full of laughter. Wade gave Zara a beautiful piece of ivory silk fabric he had ordered specially from San Francisco, knowing she had been wanting to make herself a new dress. She gave him a pair of leather gloves she had made herself, tooled with intricate designs of horses and mountains. "They are perfect," he said, pulling them on. "They fit exactly right." "I measured your hands while you were sleeping," she admitted with a smile, sneaky woman. He kissed her soundly, to the amusement of their guests. As the winter of 1878 gave way to the spring of 1879, White River began to change its opinion of Zara Ross, or at least stopped being actively hostile toward her. It helped that she and Wade were so clearly happy together. Their love was obvious to anyone who saw them, in the way they looked at each other, the way they moved around each other with unconscious coordination, the way they defended each other without hesitation. It also helped that Zara never acted ashamed or apologetic. She held her head high, did her work well, and treated everyone with courtesy whether they deserved it or not. She did not give the gossips any new ammunition, and gradually they ran out of things to say about her. In April, tragedy struck when Thomas Garrett suffered a heart attack and died in his sleep. Wade was devastated. He had lost his own father years ago, and Thomas had become a mentor and friend. The funeral was well attended, and in his will, Thomas had left instructions that Wade Ross was to be acknowledged as his chosen successor and the new owner of Diamond Creek Ranch. Some in town grumbled about it, suggesting that Wade had somehow manipulated the old man. But Thomas's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Burke, shut down that talk quickly. Mr. Garrett was of completely sound mind when he made these arrangements. He chose Mr. Ross because he recognized quality and integrity. Anyone who wants to challenge that will have to do so in court, and I promise you will lose." No one challenged it. Wade became the owner of Diamond Creek Ranch at age 27, one of the largest and most profitable spreads in the territory. He immediately made good on Thomas's promise to Mrs. Chen, ensuring she had a comfortable home and income for life. He also gave raises to the ranch hands who had stood by him during the difficult months after his marriage. With financial security established, Wade and Zara began making plans to build a proper house on the ranch. Not a mansion, but a comfortable home with enough room for the family they hoped to have. Zara drew up designs, incorporating all the things they had dreamed about during long evening conversations. In June, Zara realized she was pregnant. She was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. The memory of losing Sarah was still so painful, but this time was different. This time she had Wade beside her, supportive and loving. This time she was not facing everything alone. "I am scared," she admitted when she told him the news. "I know. I am scared too. But we will face this together, whatever comes." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "I already love this baby and I love you. We are going to be all right." The pregnancy was not easy. Zara was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. Wade hovered anxiously, bringing her dry toast and ginger tea, rubbing her back when she was ill, reading to her in the evenings to distract her from her discomfort. As her belly grew, so did her anxiety. Every twinge, every unusual sensation sent her into a panic. The doctor, a kindly man named Dr. Harrison, who had recently moved to White River, was patient with her fears. He explained that she had been very young when she had Sarah, barely 18, and her body had not been ready. Now she was older, stronger, and under proper medical care. Her chances of a healthy pregnancy were good. Still, Zara would not let herself fully believe it until she felt the baby move for the first time in October. She was sitting at the sewing machine Wade had bought her, working on a commission, when she felt a distinct flutter in her abdomen, like a butterfly trapped inside her. She gasped and pressed her hand to her stomach. "What is wrong?" Wade was beside her instantly, always alert to any sign of distress. "Nothing is wrong. The baby moved. I felt it move." She grabbed his hand and placed it on her belly. They waited breathlessly, and then it happened again, a small kick against their joined hands. Wade's face lit up with wonder. "That is our child. That is our baby saying hello." Tears streamed down Zara's face, but for once they were tears of pure joy. "We made this. We made a life together." "We made a family," Wade corrected, kissing her forehead. "You and me and this little one. Our family." In January of 1880, construction began on their new house. Wade hired a crew and oversaw the work personally, making sure everything was exactly as Zara had designed it. The house rose steadily through the winter and into spring. A solid 2-story structure with a wide front porch, a real parlor, a large kitchen, 4 bedrooms, and a sewing room with excellent light for Zara's work. They moved in during March, when Zara was 8 months pregnant and moving slowly. The new house felt enormous after the small cabin, but Zara loved every inch of it. She loved the way the morning sun filled the kitchen. She loved the view of the mountains from the bedroom window. She loved that this was truly theirs, built with their own money and dreams. "What do you think, Mrs. Ross?" Wade asked, carrying her over the threshold of their new home. "Does it meet your expectations?" "It exceeds them," she said honestly. "Everything with you exceeds my expectations. You have given me a life I never thought I could have." "We gave it to each other," he corrected, setting her down gently and pulling her into his arms. "I could not have done any of this without you. You are my partner in everything, Zara. My best friend, my love, my home. Houses are just buildings. You are what makes it a home." Their son was born on a warm evening in April 1880, after a long and difficult labor that left Wade pacing the hallway in an agony of helpless fear. When Dr. Harrison finally emerged and said, "You have a healthy son, and your wife is tired but well," Wade nearly collapsed with relief. He went into the bedroom to find Zara propped up against pillows, exhausted and pale but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Wade approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. "Come meet your son," Zara said softly. Wade sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face. His son had a surprising amount of dark hair and was making small, snuffling noises in his sleep. Wade reached out one finger, and the baby immediately grasped it with a surprisingly strong grip. "He is perfect," Wade whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are perfect. I cannot believe this is real." "He needs a name," Zara said. "I was thinking Thomas after Mr. Garrett. He brought us together in a way. If it were not for the ranch, you might have moved on from White River before we met." "Thomas Ross," Wade said, testing it out. "I think that is perfect. Tommy for short until he grows into the full name." They sat together as a family, the three of them, and Wade felt a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting from place to place. Not just a home, but a family. People to love and protect, to build a life with, to make memories with. Little Tommy thrived. He was a good baby, healthy and curious, with his mother's green eyes and his father's determined chin. Zara recovered her strength slowly, and Wade took over as much of the household work as he could while still running the ranch. Mrs. Chen came regularly to help, as did Maria and Ruth. The women who had once shunned Zara now stopped by with casseroles and baby clothes, making awkward attempts at friendliness. Mrs. Henderson came by when Tommy was 2 weeks old, carrying a beautifully knit baby blanket. "I made this for your son," she said stiffly. "My daughter insisted I bring it by. She said you did such beautiful work on her riding habit and it would be wrong not to acknowledge your happy occasion." "Thank you," Zara said, taking the blanket. "It was expertly made, soft and warm." "It is lovely. Please thank your daughter as well, Mrs." Henderson nodded and turned to leave, but at the door she paused. "I was wrong about you. I see that now. You are a good woman who had some bad luck. I am sorry for how I treated you." It was not a flowery apology, but it was sincere. Zara felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." After Mrs. Henderson left, Wade found Zara crying quietly in the parlor, Tommy asleep in her arms. "What is wrong? Did she upset you?" "No, she apologized. She actually apologized." Zara looked up at him with wonder in her eyes. "Wade, I think we actually did it. I think we won them over." "You won them over. I just stood beside you while you proved what I already knew, that you are strong and kind and worth 10 of any of them." He sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. "I am so proud of you. I could not have done it without you. When you stood up for me at the church that day, when you offered me friendship when I had nothing, you gave me the courage to keep fighting. You reminded me that their judgment did not define me." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You saved my life, Wade Ross. No, you saved your own life. I just made sure you did not have to do it alone." They sat together in their new house, watching their son sleep, and Zara felt a profound sense of gratitude for everything that had brought her to this moment. Yes, she had suffered. Yes, she had been broken and betrayed and lost things that could never be replaced. But she had also survived. She had found love when she thought her heart was too damaged to risk it again. She had found a home when she thought she would always be an outcast. As Tommy grew from infant to toddler, the Ross family became a fixture in White River. Wade was respected as a fair employer and skilled rancher. Zara's sewing business grew to the point where she had to turn down work. Women throughout the county sought her out for wedding dresses and special occasion garments. In 1882, their daughter was born, a tiny girl with her father's gray-blue eyes and a head full of dark curls. They named her Sarah, honoring the baby Zara had lost, reclaiming the name with love rather than grief. This Sarah would grow up knowing she was wanted and cherished, surrounded by family and security. Tommy, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, talking to her in his toddler babble, bringing her his favorite toys to share. Wade and Zara watched their children together and marveled at the family they had created. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life," Zara said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Tommy was playing in the yard with the ranch dogs, and Sarah was asleep in her cradle beside them. "5 years ago, I was ready to give up. I thought my life was over at 19. And now look at all this." "You built this," Wade reminded her. "You made the choice to trust again, to hope again. That took more courage than anything I have ever done." "We built it together," she corrected. "You and me, partners in everything." Wade reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers the way they had that first day by the river. "Partners," he agreed. "Always." In 1884, Reverend Mitchell retired, and a new minister came to White River, a younger man named Reverend Peterson, who believed that the church should be a place of welcome and compassion rather than judgment. One of his first acts was to invite the Ross family back to services. Zara was hesitant. The memory of being turned away from those church steps still stung, but Wade encouraged her. "You belong there as much as anyone, more than most, since you actually live by Christian principles instead of just talking about them." So they went to church as a family, Wade and Zara, 4-year-old Tommy and 2-year-old Sarah. They sat in a pew near the back, and Zara felt every eye turn toward them. But this time, the looks were not hostile. They were curious, even friendly. Mrs. Chen and her family came to sit beside them in a show of solidarity. Maria and Ruth joined them as well. Reverend Peterson's sermon that morning was about redemption and second chances. "Our God is a God of new beginnings," he said, his voice carrying through the small church. "We serve a Lord who looks at our hearts, not our past mistakes. Who among us has not stumbled? Who among us has not needed forgiveness? Let us be as generous with grace as we hope God will be with us." When the service ended, people came up to greet the Ross family. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make it clear that times were changing, that Zara had earned her place in this community through years of quiet dignity and hard work. Walking home that afternoon, Tommy running ahead and Sarah riding on Wade's shoulders, Zara felt something she had not felt in a very long time: peace. Not just happiness or contentment, but deep, abiding peace. She had made it through the fire and come out stronger. Her past no longer haunted her. She was no longer that frightened, shamed girl fleeing Santa Fe. She was Zara Ross, wife and mother, businesswoman and friend, respected member of her community. "You look thoughtful," Wade observed, shifting Sarah to his other shoulder as she giggled and grabbed at his hat. "I was just thinking about how far we have come. How different my life is now from what I thought it would be." She slipped her hand into his. "Thank you for loving me when I could not love myself. Thank you for standing beside me when it would have been easier to walk away." "There is nowhere I would rather be than beside you," Wade said simply. "Then, now, and always. You are my home, Zara. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." Their life continued to unfold in the rhythms of ranch work and family life. Wade taught Tommy to ride when he was 5. sitting the boy on the gentlest mare in the stable and walking beside him around the corral. Zara taught Sarah to sew simple stitches, the little girl concentrating fiercely as she pushed the needle through fabric. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, survived illnesses and injuries, weathered droughts and harsh winters. In 1886, Thomas Garrett Ross was born, named for both his older brother and the man who had given Wade his start. He was a sunny-natured baby who smiled at everyone and everything. 2 years later came Michael Wade Ross, who had his father's serious temperament and his mother's artistic eye. The house that had once seemed so large now felt full and lively, echoing with children's laughter and the noise of a growing family. Zara had to expand her sewing room into what had been a spare bedroom, her business having grown beyond anything she had imagined. She now employed 2 other seamstresses and had a waiting list of clients. Wade had expanded Diamond Creek Ranch as well, buying up adjacent properties as they became available. By 1890, it was one of the largest ranches in the territory, employing 50 hands and running thousands of head of cattle. Wade's reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spread throughout Arizona and beyond. On their 10th wedding anniversary in August 1888, Wade took Zara back to the Cottonwood Grove by the river where they had held their first private church service. The children were staying with Mrs. Chen for the day, giving them rare time alone together. 10 years, Wade said, pulling Zara down to sit beside him on the same fallen log where they had sat that first Sunday. A decade since I made the best decision of my life. Marrying a woman the whole town hated, Zara teased. Such a smart decision. Marrying the woman I loved, the smartest decision I ever made. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I never properly proposed to you. It was all rushed and practical, born out of necessity rather than romance. I want to do it right this time. He opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with 3 small emeralds the exact shade of Zara's eyes. Zara Wright Ross, you are the love of my life, the mother of my children, my partner in all things. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Again, I mean, renew our vows and start another 10 years together. Zara's eyes filled with tears. You are such a sentimental fool. Is that a yes? That is a yes, you wonderful, ridiculous man. She held out her left hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger beside the plain band she had worn since their wedding. I love you, Wade. I will always love you. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You gave me a family, a home, a future. You gave me everything. You gave it all back to me tenfold. He kissed her softly. Here is to the next 10 years and the 10 after that and all the years to come. I want to grow old with you, Zara. I want to watch our children grow up and have children of their own. I want to sit on our porch when we are gray and creaky, holding hands and remembering all the battles we fought together. That sounds perfect, Zara said, and kissed him again. They renewed their vows in the little church with Reverend Peterson officiating, surrounded by all 4 of their children, and a church full of people who had come to witness and celebrate. This time, when Zara walked down the aisle, there were no whispers or turned backs. There were only smiles and the warm glow of community acceptance. The years continued to pass, each one adding layers of memories and love to the foundation they had built. Tommy grew into a serious young man who shared his father's gift with horses. Sarah became a talented artist, painting landscapes of the Arizona territory that people came from miles around to buy. Young Thomas proved to have a head for business, already helping his father with ranch accounts at age 12. Michael was the scholar, always reading, talking about going to university back east to study law. In 1895, When Zara was 37 and Wade was 43, they welcomed their fifth and final child, a daughter they named Grace. She was born in the same house where her siblings had been born, attended by the same doctor, surrounded by the same love. By then, Tommy was 15 and Sarah was 13, old enough to help care for their baby sister. The older children adored Grace, and she grew up doted on by her entire large family. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1897, at the age of 78. The Ross family mourned her deeply. She had been a true friend when friends were scarce, and her kindness had helped make their family possible. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a headstone that read, "Beloved Friend." As the new century approached, Zara sometimes thought back to that terrified, ashamed girl who had arrived in White River in 1878. It felt like a lifetime ago, like a different person entirely. That girl could never have imagined the life Zara now led. The prosperous ranch, the thriving business, the 5 healthy children, the husband who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. On a warm evening in June of 1900, Wade and Zara sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. It was a scene they had repeated thousands of times over the past 22 years, but it never grew old. Tommy had moved into his own house on the property with his new wife, a sweet girl named Emma from the neighboring ranch. Sarah was engaged to a young lawyer in Tucson. Young Thomas was away at school learning modern ranching techniques. Michael had indeed gone east to study law and would graduate the following year. Grace, now 5 years old, was playing in the yard with a new litter of puppies. "Grandmother," Grace called out, "come see." Zara looked up, confused, then realized her granddaughter Emma was standing in the doorway behind them, a smile on her face and her hands resting on her slightly rounded belly. Understanding dawned, and Zara let out a delighted laugh. "When?" she asked. "January, the doctor thinks. We were waiting to be sure before we told everyone." Emma glanced at Tommy, who had just ridden up and was grinning like a fool. "But that little one has sharp eyes." "Grandparents," Wade said wonderingly. "We are going to be grandparents." "Getting old, Mr. Ross," Zara teased, but her eyes were bright with happy tears. "Getting blessed, Mrs. Ross," he corrected, pulling her close. "More blessed than any man has a right to be." That night, lying in bed, Wade and Zara talked quietly about the future. About the grandchildren they would spoil, the legacy they were building, the life they had created against all odds. "You ever regret it?" Wade asked. "Marrying me, I mean. You could have left White River, started completely fresh somewhere else where no one knew your history." "Not for a single moment," Zara said firmly. "You taught me something important, Wade. You taught me that running away does not solve anything. That the only way through difficulty is straight ahead, with your head held high and people you trust beside you. You taught me that one person's unwavering support matters more than 1,000 people's judgment. You taught me plenty, too. You taught me about real courage, the kind that keeps going even when it seems impossible. You taught me that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling that comes and goes. You taught me what true partnership looks like." He kissed her forehead. "We made a pretty good team, did we not?" "The best team," she agreed. "And we are not done yet. We still have Grace to raise, grandchildren to spoil, probably a few more battles to fight. I hear there is talk of Arizona becoming a state someday. Then we will face it all together, the way we always have." In January of 1901, their first grandchild was born, a boy named Wade Thomas Ross, called Little Wade to distinguish him from his grandfather. Holding his grandson for the first time, Wade Ross felt the circle of life complete. He had been an orphan at 16 with nothing but his own 2 hands and his determination. Now he was grandfather to a child who would grow up secure and loved, who would inherit not just property but values, not just wealth but character. "Your great-grandmother would have loved to see this," he whispered to the sleeping baby. "She would have been so proud of how far we have come." Zara stood beside him, their daughter-in-law resting comfortably in the bed, and thought about her own mother who had abandoned her so long ago. That pain had faded over the years, replaced by the family she had created. She had 5 children who knew they were loved, a husband who had stood by her through everything, and now a grandchild to treasure. She had built a life of meaning and purpose despite everything that had tried to break her. The town that had once shunned her now respected her. She served on the school board and the church ladies' auxiliary. She employed a dozen women in her expanded sewing business. She was known throughout the territory for both her skill and her fairness. When young women found themselves in trouble, fallen and afraid, they came to Zara Ross because they knew she would not judge them. She would help them, guide them, remind them that their mistakes did not define their worth. "How many girls have you helped now?" Wade asked one evening in 1903, after Zara had spent the afternoon counseling a young woman whose family had thrown her out for getting pregnant. "I stopped counting after the first dozen," Zara admitted. "But it matters, Wade. Every single one matters. If I can spare even one girl the shame and isolation I felt, then everything I went through had a purpose." "You are amazing," Wade said, pulling her into his arms. "Have I told you that recently?" "Not in the past hour," she teased. "Let me remedy that." "You, Zara Wright Ross, are the most amazing woman I have ever known. You took your pain and turned it into compassion. You took your suffering and used it to help others. You are stronger and kinder and more generous than anyone I have ever met. I am in awe of you." "Stop, you are making me blush like a girl." "Good. You are beautiful when you blush." Their love, which had started as friendship and grown through adversity, had matured into something deep and unshakable. They bickered sometimes about small things, the way any couple married for 25 years would, but the foundation was solid. They trusted each other completely. They made decisions together. They still held hands when they walked. They still kissed each other goodbye every morning and hello every evening. When Sarah married her lawyer in a beautiful ceremony in 1904, Zara made her wedding dress, an elaborate creation of white silk and lace that took 3 months to complete. Watching her daughter walk down the aisle, radiant and confident, Zara wept happy tears. Sarah would never know the shame and fear that had marked Zara's youth. She would marry as a respected young woman from a good family, with her future bright before her. "You did that," Wade whispered, watching their daughter. "You made sure she grew up knowing her worth. You gave her the confidence to wait for a man who deserved her. That is your legacy." "Our legacy," Zara corrected. "I could not have done any of it without you." Over the following years, the Ross children continued to build their own lives. Tommy and Emma had 4 children and ran the horse breeding program at Diamond Creek. Sarah and her husband settled in Tucson, where he practiced law and she painted. Young Thomas took over the business side of the ranch, proving to have an even sharper mind for numbers than his father. Michael returned from law school and opened a practice in White River, quickly becoming known for taking on cases others would not touch, defending those without means or power. Grace grew into a bright, spirited young woman who talked about becoming a teacher. In February of 1912, Arizona officially became the 48th state of the Union. Wade and Zara stood with their children and grandchildren, now numbering 9 in total, and watched the celebration in White River. They had been part of this territory for over 30 years, had helped build it and shape it. Seeing it achieve statehood felt like a validation of all the hard work and hope that had gone into settling this rough land. "We are part of history now," young Grace said, eyes shining. She was 17, the same age Zara had been when she met Marcus Dalton and her life fell apart. "We have always been part of history," Zara told her daughter. "Every choice we make, every stand we take, it all matters. It all adds up to something bigger than ourselves." Wade put his arm around Zara's shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth the way she had been doing for 34 years. They had gray in their hair now and lines around their eyes. Wade's hands were gnarled from decades of ranch work, and Zara's fingers were stiff from endless hours of sewing. But they were healthy and happy and surrounded by family they loved. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Wade pulled Zara into his arms and held her close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For saying yes all those years ago when I asked you to marry me. For taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing but good intentions and a stubborn streak. For building this life with me. For giving me a family and a home and more love than I ever thought I would have." "I should be thanking you," Zara said. "You saved me, Wade. You stood beside me when no one else would. You reminded me that their judgment did not define me. You gave me back my life." "We saved each other," Wade said. "That is what love does. It makes both people better, stronger. It gives you someone to lean on when times are hard and someone to celebrate with when times are good. That is what we have always been to each other." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the ease of long familiarity and the deep passion that had never faded. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Zara thought about the journey that had brought them here. All the pain and struggle, all the small victories and hard-won acceptance, all the years of building something solid and true. "I would do it all again," she whispered. "Every hard moment, every tear, every battle, I would do it all again to end up here with you." "Me too," Wade agreed. 1,000 times over. In 1915, Michael Ross successfully argued a case before the Arizona Supreme Court, establishing legal protections for women who had been deceived by false promises of marriage. The case made newspapers throughout the state, and Michael credited his mother as his inspiration. "I grew up watching my mother overcome prejudice and build a good life, despite being judged for circumstances beyond her control," he told reporters. "I saw how one man's lies could destroy a woman's reputation while he faced no consequences. That is not justice. That is not right. We need laws that protect women from predatory behavior and hold men accountable for their actions." Zara kept the newspaper clipping in her Bible, tears running down her face as she read it. "Look what came from my pain," she said to Wade. "Look what good emerged from something so terrible. My son is changing laws. He is helping women like I was, making sure they have legal recourse. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck. It was you teaching him compassion and justice. It was you showing him that people deserve second chances and that circumstances do not determine worth." Wade kissed her temple. "You should be so proud." "I am. I am proud of all of them. We raised good people, Wade. We did. We really did." Thomas Ross married in 1916, bringing another daughter-in-law into the family fold. Grace became a teacher as she had dreamed, working in the White River School and becoming known for her patience with difficult students. The family continued to grow and thrive, adding new members and new grandchildren with each passing year. In the summer of 1918, as the Great War raged in Europe, Wade and Zara celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. All 5 of their children came home for the occasion, bringing their spouses and children. The house was filled with noise and laughter, 3 generations of Ross family gathering to celebrate. At the party, Wade stood up to make a toast. 40 years ago, I made a choice. I chose to stand beside a woman this town had shunned, to defend her when she was defenseless, to offer her friendship when she had nothing. People thought I was crazy. They said I was throwing my life away. But I knew something they did not. I knew that Zara Wright was the strongest, bravest, most remarkable person I had ever met. And I was right. He looked at Zara, his eyes bright with love. These 40 years have been the best of my life. You have given me 5 incredible children, a home full of love, a partnership that made me better than I ever could have been alone. You took your pain and turned it into purpose. You faced judgment with grace. You met cruelty with kindness. You never let them make you small or mean or bitter. That is the real miracle, Zara. Not that you survived, but that you survived with your heart still open, your spirit still generous. Zara was crying openly now, and she was not alone. Most of the people in the room had tears in their eyes. I love you, Wade finished. I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing outside the general store trying so hard to be brave. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. Thank you for 40 years of happiness. Here is to 40 more. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Zara stood and embraced Wade, burying her face in his shoulder. I do not know about 40 more years, she whispered. We are getting pretty old. Then however many we have left, Wade whispered back. Every day with you is a gift. The party went on late into the night, full of music and dancing and stories of years past. Watching her children dance, her grandchildren play, her family happy and thriving, Zara felt a sense of completion. This was what she had fought for. This was what all the pain and struggle had been leading toward. Not just her own happiness, but this legacy of love and resilience and second chances. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house had finally quieted, Wade and Zara walked out onto the porch to look at the stars. The summer air was warm and soft, carrying the scent of sage and desert flowers. You remember the first time we sat by the river together? Zara asked, her hand in Wade's. I remember everything about that day. The way the sun came through the cottonwood leaves. The way you looked when you finally smiled. The moment I realized I was falling in love with you. I was so scared that day. Scared to hope, scared to trust, scared to believe that someone could see past my shame to the person I really was. She turned to face him. You gave me hope when I had none. You trusted me when I could not trust myself. You saw the person I could become and loved her into existence. No, you were always that person. I just reminded you. Wade cupped her face in his weathered hands. Zara, you are the love of my life. The best part of me. Everything good in my world exists because of you. They stood together under the vast Arizona sky, two people who had found each other in the darkest of times and built something beautiful from the ashes of pain. Their journey had not been easy. There had been tears and struggle, judgment and cruelty. But there had also been love, fierce and true and unshakable. Their judgment did not define me, Zara said softly, echoing the words Wade had spoken to her so many years ago. Because you taught me that I define myself. My choices, my actions, my heart, those things mattered. Not the opinions of people who did not know me, did not care to know me, did not see my worth. You taught me the same thing, Wade said. You taught me that standing up for what is right matters more than fitting in. That defending the powerless is more important than preserving your own comfort. That love, real love, is about choosing someone every single day and standing beside them no matter what comes. They kissed under the stars, the same way they had kissed thousands of times before, and the same way they would kiss thousands of times more. Because this was their story, not a fairy tale where everything was perfect, but a real love story where two imperfect people chose each other and kept choosing each other through every trial and triumph. In the years that followed, Wade and Zara grew old together with grace and gratitude. They welcomed more grandchildren and then great-grandchildren into the family. They saw their children succeed and struggle and persevere. They watched the world change around them, from horses to automobiles, from oil lamps to electricity, from territorial outpost to modern state. Through it all, they remained each other's constant. When Wade's health began to fail in his 70s, Zara nursed him with patient devotion. When Zara's eyesight dimmed and she could no longer sew, Wade read to her every evening, his voice as steady and comforting as it had always been. On a warm spring morning in 1928, Wade Ross passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76. He was surrounded by family, Zara holding his hand, their children gathered close. His last words were simple: "I love you, always have, always will." Zara grieved deeply but not hopelessly. She had had 50 years of marriage to a good man, a life full of love and meaning and purpose. She had been blessed beyond measure. She lived 5 more years after Wade's death, staying in the house they had built together, surrounded by family and memories. When Zara Wright Ross died peacefully in her sleep in May of 1933 at the age of 75, the entire town of White River turned out for her funeral. The church that had once barred her entry was packed with people wanting to pay their respects. Reverend Peterson, now retired but still beloved, came out of retirement to perform the service. He spoke about redemption and grace, about a young woman who had come to White River carrying shame and sorrow, and a cowboy who had seen past her circumstances to her character. He spoke about how their love had not just transformed their own lives, but had changed the entire community, challenging people to look at others with more compassion and less judgment. "Zara Ross taught us that our past does not determine our future," he said. "That with courage and support and love, we can overcome anything. That judging others for their worst moments while excusing our own failings is the height of hypocrisy." She lived a life of quiet dignity and loud compassion. She helped countless women who found themselves in difficult circumstances. She raised 5 remarkable children who are all making the world better in their own ways. And she loved one man with her whole heart for 50 years. What better legacy could any of us hope for? They buried Zara beside Wade on the hillside overlooking Diamond Creek Ranch, the land they had built together. The headstone reads simply, "Zara Wright Ross, 1858–1933. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, her courage inspired us all." At the reception after the funeral, the 5 Ross children stood together with their families, 3 generations strong. Tommy was 65 now, gray-haired and grandfather to 7. Sarah was 63, still painting despite her arthritis. Thomas at 59 ran the ranch with his sons. Michael at 55 was a respected judge. Grace, the baby at 43, had just been appointed school principal. "They did good, did they not?" Tommy said, looking around at the sprawling family their parents had created. "Built something that will last." "They built more than a ranch or a business," Michael said. "They built a legacy of standing up for what is right, of defending those who cannot defend themselves, of loving deeply and living with integrity. That is what we inherited, and that is what we need to pass on." The others nodded in agreement. They understood that they had been given not just property or wealth, but values and character. Their parents' love story was not just romance, it was a roadmap for how to live. With courage, with compassion, with an unwavering commitment to justice and human dignity. Years later, when historians looked back at the settling of Arizona, the Ross family would be mentioned not just for their successful ranch, but for their social impact. Michael Ross's legal work had changed laws throughout the state. Zara Ross's assistance to vulnerable women had saved lives and preserved dignity. Wade Ross's decision to stand beside a shunned woman had challenged an entire community to examine their prejudices. But perhaps the greatest impact was the simplest. They had loved each other completely, stood by each other faithfully, and proved that redemption was always possible, that second chances could lead to extraordinary lives, and that the judgment of others need not define who we become. Their story lived on in their descendants, in the ranch that still operated under Ross family management, in the laws that protected women's rights, in the countless lives touched by their compassion. It lived on in the simple truth they had proven, that love, real and true and steadfast, can overcome anything. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Wade and Zara were together again, their hands clasped, their love eternal, still teaching the world that their judgment did not define her, that his loyalty defined them both, and that standing beside someone through their darkest hour is the truest expression of love the world has ever known.